loom is the next lesson that we're going to learn about in our history of coding. Now before we talk about this, let's talk a little bit about what a loom is. A loom is how you weave fabric into blankets or into tapestries. So it's this big machine that has lots of different pieces of thread, and someone moves something back and forth and the next row of thread comes down. And on a loom you have to decide, especially if you're weaving a tapestry or some kind of blanket that has a pattern or design on it, you have to decide which strings will go up and be in front of the other ones so that the color will be on top and be the one that shows. So the Jacquard loom is a mechanical loom. It's the first one that was ever programmed. So of course, when we're talking about the history of coding, the history of computers, we're going to be talking about some computer programming. Now looms obviously are not computers, but they did learn how to program them. So the person wasn't the one going through and lifting all of the strings and deciding, okay, now the red needs to be on top here and the blue needs to be on top here. Instead, they used punched cards as a system of figuring out which thread would move up or down for that loom to go through next. So they would put the punched cards into this machine and feed them through. You could feed in several punched cards at a time, and each card would mean one line of fabric. So think about how many different punched cards you'd have to make a whole blanket or a whole tapestry if each one of those cards was one line of fabric telling which strings to move up and which strings to move down, so the colors would be the ones that you would see. So the punched holes were the ones that controlled the weaving and the patterns in the fabric. The loom enabled even the most amateur, even the people who'd never used a loom before, those amateur people, to even be able to weave those complex designs and beautiful blankets and tapestries. So the Jacquard loom was the first machine to use punched cards in order to control a sequence of operations, something that happened one right after another. And although there was no computation based on it, it's considered an important step in the history of computing because it was that first step that was using different things in order to create a system and a sequence within it. The ability to change the pattern of the loom's weave was also really important because you could not only weave one tapestry on the loom, but then you could go through and put different punched cards in and have a completely different tapestry the next time you used it. I have a tapestry example for you. This one is a portrait of Jacquard himself, and this portrait was woven in 1839 and required 24,000 punched cards just to create that one portrait. Can you imagine looking at this machine and watching all these cards go through? Now a lot of times there usually had to still be someone with the machine. They would take this piece and send it through underneath each time the machine went back and forth. But that's all they had to do. Pretty simple. I think even a kid could do it thanks to the Jacquard loom, which made weaving tapestries very easy and was the first way that we programmed a machine.